Hi, I'm James and welcome to the latest review, which is Warlord Games Tiger 1 Ausf E. Now it's made by Italeri and sold through Warlord, so it's not going to be a full modeller's kit. It's more intended for gamers, which is what I am, so that suits me down to the ground. Now the Tiger does have a fascination with people. There are only a very small number left in existence, and fortunately I've actually seen the real live Tiger 131, which runs at Bovington Tank Museum, and you can see when you look at this footage why it's such a popular tank. So looking at the model kit then, we've got two sprues moulded in grey plastic. The wheels are all assembled complete, which is quite useful, although we do need to add the drive wheel onto it later on. That's keyed, so it can only fit it in one way, which is quite useful. There is a crew figure on there as well, although I didn't use that. We'll talk more about that later. We've then got the turret with the sides, and you've got the tracks. Now the tracks are 4 pieces on each side. I'd like them just moulded on if I'm 100% honest, but I do know that by doing it this way we do get a much more realistic look to them. They do hang a little better, and it is nice the fact that they aren't taut. They look like they're the correct tension, with it lifting up at the front where it goes over the drive wheel. So yeah, that's okay. You also get a couple of other little bits. You get the bolt action data card for it. I think probably inspired by the success of the Flames of War type ones. It's nice and simple, everything's on there, so yeah, that is quite useful. It's a nice little picture, and it makes your life easier, but it's not exactly a critical thing if you don't have them. You've also got the transfers there with the various numbers on. I'm quite bemused it has 131 on there. Can't think why they've done that one. And then there's a bag for your smoke markers, damage, so on. So you get that with it as well. It's a useful little extra. So how did it go together? Well, trying to put it together was relatively easy. I know some people have said there were one or two issues with some of the hull plates. I found they went on really well. The difficulty I did have was the tracks. I did find them incredibly hard to fit, and I know some people have said that they are relatively easy, some have said they're quite complex. I did struggle a little. It's worth building up one at a time so you don't mix the parts up, but they weren't perfect. Fortunately, because I'm building mine in a mud and snow setting, it was quite easy to put some mud to cover where I had a slight gap on that. The detail on them is actually really good. It's just that frustration of fitting them together. Now, as for the model itself, it's a late version of the Tiger. It's got the late cupola on it, which is a lot lower, so that's worth noting. They've put the number 131 in, as I said, but unfortunately it won't do for Tiger 131 because it's got the wrong cupola, it's not got the tropical filters, and it's got the Zimmerit anti-mine paste. Now the Zimmerit was used between December 43 and September 44, although it was applied in the field slightly later than that, and it's got the ridge pattern Zimmerit, which was the most common, as opposed to the waffle pattern, which is what you see usually on the Strug assault guns. So it's definitely intended for later in the war. Now there were a grand total of 1,347 produced, although some will say 1,350, some say 1,358. So it's not going to be the commonest tank. They were put together in special heavy Panzer units. So logically with them, if you are going to use them, you could justify having more than one. And in fact, it would be usual to either have Tigers or other tanks. You wouldn't necessarily get them mixed. Although in Tunisia, which this wouldn't really be suitable for, they were assigned Panzer IIIs as escort tanks, which would make a nice little unit. So, other little notes: there's no smoke dischargers fitted to the vehicle. That's not an issue because they were frequently removed in the field because they would often catch fire if they were hit, so I can live with that. It's got track fixed to the sides of the turret, which was a late modification. It doesn't have any on the front of the hull, which was much more common early on, and if you look back to the Tiger 131 pictures, you'll see that. So that was a bit of an oddity. But it probably took me 3/4 of an hour to build, and then a lot longer painting it up. It was the first time I've tried using an airbrush, so I'm relatively happy with the results. It went together well. I've fitted the optional MG34 machine gun on the top, which means you can actually have 3 MG34s, because there's the one in the hull, the coaxial, and then you have the option of the third. That's actually not particularly common. Usually the German tanks were issued 2, and they chose which positions to mount them in. So it just looks nice. I don't have to use it in the game. That's my logic. You'll also notice I've not used the standard crew figure. There was nothing wrong with it. In fact, it's actually quite a nice figure. But what I wanted to do was to try out the First Corps crew figures, and you can see a separate review of those elsewhere on the site. It's a really nice model. I'd highly recommend it. It looks right on the tabletop, and boy is it intimidating. It's also a very quick way to up your army points value, because it's not exactly the cheapest of units. I hope you found that useful, and I'll see you soon for another review.